Sechas Nazir Daf Lamed Vav gets into the sugya of ta'aroves, when you have Isser and Heter or Chulin and Truma mixed together. How do we calculate the minimum amounts that are relevant to certain halachos? So we've seen the concept of calculating sizes in the most recent Mishnah, where we were discussing the amount of wine that a Nazir would have to drink to violate the Isser. Now here we're not talking about what the amount is, concise or revius. We're talking about how to calculate that amount. So when you have a mixture, there are two ways to calculate. In our Mishnah, we saw the concept of Isser mitzaref leheter or heter mitzaref le'isser, which means that when you have a mixture, you calculate the net size of the Isser and the heter together. So if you were to eat a kizayas of bread with wine soaked in it, where the total volume of the bread and wine together is a kizayas, if you said heter mitzaref le'isser, you would violate the Isser of eating wine for your Nazir, even though you didn't have a kizayas of wine. But because it's mixed together with the bread, it would count as a heter, as in Isser kizayas. That would be the concept of heter mitzaref le'isser. And in our last Mishnah, we saw that halacha does apply by Naziris. Now, there's another way to violate the Isser if you have wine soaked into bread, and that's if you eat so much bread that there's an actual kizayas of wine there. That's what you would say if heter is not mitzaref le'isser. Now, of course, in order to eat that, you would have to eat a significant enough size of bread, and would also have to be within the time that one normally eats, and that's what we call kedei achilas pras, which is about 3 or 4 minutes. A pras is half a loaf of bread, which takes either 6 to 8 minutes to eat. So that is, the loaf takes 6 to 8 minutes to eat. So pras is 3 to 4 minutes. So you would have to eat enough bread within 3 to 4 minutes that you got the kizayas of wine within there. So that would be called, you ate a pras, an achilas pras, and there was a kizayas in there, what we call for short kedei achilas pras. So the question that the Gemara begins with is, are there other isurim besides for wine to a Nazir where we find the halacha of heter mitzaref le'isser? You actually count the heter as part of the Isser. So the Gemara quotes Rabbi Avo and Rabbi Yechon, and it says that you only find it in one other place, and that's, he says there are no other places, and that is Nazir only. Now Zairi adds there is another place, and that's the Isser of bringing chametz in a carbon mincha. Torah tells us when you bring a carbon mincha, you don't have any chametz in there. It says chol mincha shetakrivu l'Hashem lo sasa chametz. Lo say asa chametz. Ki kol sa'ar v'chol davash lo satir mimenu ish el Hashem. No chametz goes in a carbon mincha, and you violate an Isser of bal taktiru if you do. Now, what if you bring a mixture of chametz and matzah together, or chametz and non-chametz in your carbon mincha? Do you violate the Isser or not? So Zairi says you do violate the Isser, and the Gemara explains in Mesachas Menachos it's because of a drasha where it says kol. It says kol hamincha. Ki kol, it says ki kol sa'or v'chol dvash. That's to include not only if you have chametz, but even if you have a mixture of chametz and non-chametz, you violate the Isser anyway. And Zairi says that's because of the concept of heter mitzaref le'isser. So the Gemara asks if the source of the drasha is from Ki Kol. That's a drasha that's made by Rabbi Elazar in a Mishnah that's quoted there in Mesachas Menachos. And based on that drasha, he also has another halacha, and that's when a person eats chametz on Pesach, it also says Ki Kol or Kol, and you learn from there that you say heter mitzaref le'isser there also. So why doesn't Zairi bring that also? Based on the same drasha, I must hold if that halacha also, why doesn't he mention that that's another place where you find heter mitzaref le'isser? So the answer is yes, true. Zairi also holds there you have heter mitzaref le'isser based on the same drasha, like Rabbi Elazar says. However, he didn't feel like he needed to make the point. Here he wanted to make the point specifically because according to Abaye, it would not be true. Why according to Abaye would not be true? Because Abaye holds in Mesachas Menachos that the Isser of Bal Taktiru does not have a minimum shear. Somebody who brings any size chametz in a carbon mincha violates the Isser, and there is no minimum shear. According to that, there is no application of the concept of heter mitzaref l'isser because there is no size. Doesn't matter what's mitzaref because any amount of chametz at all violates the isser. And so as Ziri pointed out, not that way. There is a minimum size, but the heter is mitzaref to that as well. All right, the Gemara now goes further into the concepts of heter mitzaref l'isser versus Kidei Achilas Pras. So the Gemara quotes that Rav Dimi was sitting and saying over this sugya, and Abaye asked the kasha from a brisa. Brisa talks about if you have a stew, a thick liquid, possibly made from cooked grain, like a porridge, and it's mixed with garlic and oil that serve to spice it. So the brisa, that is, talks about truma and chulin, and two different versions. Either the stew, which is the majority, was truma, and the onion and the oil and the garlic were chulin, or the other way around. The stew itself was chulin, and the oil and the garlic were the truma. So in the first case, where the stew, which is the majority, is the truma. So if a tful yoim, who is somebody who has tumas shnia, second level tuma, midrabanan, if he goes and he touches part of the stew, so the halacha is he makes everything puzzle. Puzzle meaning that it's usher to eat, but it's not going to be matame anything else. And the reason is because truma, because it has kedusha, it can become a third level tuma. It can't make a fourth level tuma, and therefore it would cause itself to become puzzle only because it's truma, but it can't transfer truma further. If it would be chulin, it would not become tameh at all because chulin cannot become third level tuma caused by second level tuma. Tful yom, like we said, is a second level tuma. Now, the focus of our sugya is not that case. The focus of sugya is the next case, where the stew was chulin and the garlic and the oil was truma. Now here, the majority of it is chulin, and therefore it can't become tameh. However, the brisa says the place that he touched becomes tameh, not the rest of it. The rest of it does not become tameh, just the place that he touched. So the Gemara asks, why does the place that he touched become tameh if it's chulin? It shouldn't become tameh at all. The Gemara answers because there is a halacha that if a non-kohen would eat it, he would get malchus for it. Even though it's mostly chulin, he would get malchus for it, and therefore it does have the halacha that becomes tameh at least in that spot. It's only in that spot, not the rest of it, because the garlic and the oil separates it from the rest of it. So Gemara says, so you see that if a non-kohen were to eat a concise of this mixture, he would get malchus. Why should that be? He's only touching part of it. It's less than the entire thing, and it's probably less than a kizayas. So, why should, if a non-kohen eats a kizayas of the entire mixture, he gets malchus, but he didn't eat a kizayas of truma? It's mostly chulin. So the Gemara answers. The Gemara says it must therefore be a proof of heter mitzaref l'isser. You see here that this is a case of heter mitzaref l'isser. You count the non-truma as truma here. So the Gemara says, no, we're not talking about where it's heter mitzaref l'isser. We're talking about where it's kidei achilas pras. That you ate enough of it that you would actually get a kizayis of truma in the amount of time it takes to eat a pras, within 3 to 4 minutes. So the Gemara asks, but hold on a second. It says here you get malchus. Kazayas b'chidei achilas pras, you get malchus for that? It's an isser d'oraisa? I thought kazayas b'chidei achilas pras is an isser d'arbanan. So the Gemara says, yes, it is actually kazayas and a kidei achilas pras is an isser d'oraisa. The Gemara says that can't be. Because you have a different Gemara with a zamchakis between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Lazar about kutach habavli. Kudach habavli is a kind of yogurt. It contains soured milk that's very sharp, as well as breadcrumbs. And in the halachos of chametz, we discuss kudach habavli, and over there, the Rabbanon say that you're not chayiv for it. So the question is, why not? But you're telling me that that sounds like that would be true, even if you ate a kazayis and a kidei achilas pras. And you're telling me that a kazayis and a kidei achilas pras is an issa d'oraisa. So the Gemara says, no, this over there it's different because kutach abavli you don't eat plain. You only eat it together with bread or something like that, or some other things. So if you eat it plain, it's not an Issa D'Oraisa at all because it's not the normal way of eating it. If you eat it together with other things, you can't get a Kedei Achilas Pras of Chametz. Okay, the Gemara is now going to ask another kasha. We're going to again try to prove that Kedei Achilas Pras is not an Issa D'Oraisa. If somebody gets a concise by eating it in a mixture, within the time of a Pras, he doesn't violate an Issa D'Oraisa. So we bring a case. You have two bowls that you use to grind spices, and in front of them is two pots. One of the bowls contains truma, one contains chulin. One of the pots contains truma, one contains chulin. And the contents of the bowls fall into the contents of the pots. So we don't know what fell into what. So if the chulin fell into chulin, everything's fine. If the truma fell into the truma, everything's fine. However, if the truma fell into the pot of chulin, a non-Kohen would not be allowed to eat that. So the verse says you don't have to assume, you could assume that the truma fell into the truma, and therefore everything's fine. So it says the Gemara, why should I be able to assume that? On the tzad, that Kazayas and Kedei Achilas Pras is an Issa D'Oraisa, maybe the truma fell into the chulin, and now if somebody eats a pras worth of it, he'll eat a Kazayas truma and Kedei Achilas Pras as an Issa D'Oraisa. We know that halachas you can only assume that everything fell in the right place on an Issa D'Rabbanan, not if it's an Issa D'Oraisa. So the Gemara answers, this is different. It's an Issa D'Rabbanan not because Achilas Pras, it's an Issa D'Rabbanan because Truma on everything besides grain is only D'Rabbanan B'zman Hazeh. So therefore, it's only an Issa D'Rabbanan for other reasons. So versus another kasha. Somebody has two boxes of grain. One contains Truma, one contains Chulin. And then he has two containers. One contains Truma, one contains Chulin. And again, the contents of one falls into the other. We want to assume the Truma fell into the Truma, not into the Chulin. So it says you're allowed to assume that. And the question is, why should you be allowed to do that? And here, you can't tell me the same answer as before, because here we're talking about grain. We're not talking about something else, which is only Midrabanan. This is real Truma D'Oraisa. Now, in the last kasha, the Gemara there had made the point that it wouldn't really be any better if you said that the reason that there's an issue here is because of Heter Mitzaref L'Isser. Because Heter Mitzaref L'Isser is also D'Oraisa. Kedei Achilas Pras and Heter Mitzaref L'Isser wouldn't help it. So now the Gemara makes the point that here Heter Mitzaref L'Isser would be better. And that's because Heter Mitzaref L'Isser only works if the Isser is Roiv. If it's more Isser than there's Heter. In this case, Pasha says there's more Heter than Isser. So you wouldn't have Heter Mitzaref L'Isser in this case. It must be that it's because it's Kazayis B'Kedei Achilas Pras, and it would seem to be a din D'Oraisa, and therefore you have a problem that you're telling me that it's only a din Midrabanan. So the Gemara answers no. Truma today is D'Rabbanan altogether. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, Truma was D'Rabbanan. Truma was D'Oraisa. Today, it's only D'Rabbanan even on grain.